are listening to the SecureWorld Sessions, a cybersecurity podcast that gives you access.
Access granted.
Access to people and ideas that inspire and inform. Hello and welcome to episode 48 of the SecureWorld Sessions. My name is Bruce Sussman. I'm Director of Content at SecureWorld and also your podcast host. In today's session, we're going to mix things up a bit because it is Youth and Cybercrime Week, and SecureWorld is partnering with the Cybercrime Support Network to raise awareness around this problem and to discuss some possible solutions, things that could even help develop more cybersecurity talent for the world. And we need more of that, right? So we have two featured interviews. First, we're going to chat with a British gamer turned hacker who ended up launching cyber attacks, and he went to jail when he was just 14 years old.
When it happened, it was a major shock. Like, I couldn't believe it was happening. It was sort of like a dream. So I was walking down the street to go into school, and like I genuinely like had no worries. I had my headphones in. I was just chilling, and I heard some guy behind me saying my name. So I turn around and he's like, "You're under arrest. Stay where you are." And then there's like two more guys in suits behind him. So it's like a full-on FBI situation.
That is Cam, and we'll dive into his story as we consider how kids can get into cybercrime. That is one part of Youth in Cybercrime Week. The other part involves kids who are becoming victims of cybercrime.
And we want to make sure that we're putting out specific messaging to children, teens, college-age students, and their parents, because there are certain types of cybercrime and also certain places where these people live at these different ages where they can be impacted.
We'll dive into those cyber issues during our second interview with Kristin Judge, who is CEO of the nonprofit Cybercrime Support Network. Also, a quick thanks to Trend Micro today. Trend Micro is our premier podcast partner. Now, I want to introduce you to someone named Cam. He lives in England, which you'll be able to tell from his accent. He's a cybersecurity professional, a security analyst to be specific. And his career is a complete turnaround story from his teenage years when he was launching cyber attacks against websites around the world as part of a social justice campaign. Now, Cam says he got started hacking when he decided to create mods or modifications to the games he was playing on his PS3. In a short amount of time, he went from gaming to modifying them to attacking competitors so he could get the win. It's a cautionary tale for anyone with teenagers who game, because Cam never set out to become a criminal hacker, and when he became one, he never thought about getting caught until he did.
When I was 14, I used to play PS3 back then. I used to play Modern Warfare 1, World at War, and Modern Warfare 2.
I understand that you didn't like to lose, especially to like digital cheaters. What were you seeing others do, and what did you decide to do in response?
So there was times where people would be able to like freeze my PS3 or kick me offline. I think kicking me offline was sort of like a surprise, and then after that came like my PS3 getting frozen, which was kind of a mega surprise. I didn't know someone had the power to do that. So yeah, I felt like I had to do something to get myself back in the running, if it makes sense.
Interesting. And what was it that you decided to do to get yourself back in the running?
Started with my own DDoS and booting people offline. And then I was like, this isn't enough.
You're kind of doing a denial of service attack against your gaming competitors. And I'm wondering at this point, I mean, does it just seem to you like this is fun, or are you thinking maybe this is illegal? Like
I said, to be honest, I just didn't really like losing. I didn't really like losing, whether it be my friends or whether it be some guy over the internet. I wouldn't just do it willy-nilly like that, but it would be if someone was talking trash or if someone was also using mods, that I'd use my own mods or use my own tools to beat them.
I understand that you then kind of got more curious about things and you were maybe joining some hacker forums or different chat groups. What happened in these places and spaces that you went to online that kind of kept you going in the direction of hacking?
There was like a few things really, because I joined up obviously initially for the video game mods or whatever. So I grabbed some video game mods, and then someone would post something the next day saying, "Oh, like grab yourself a free Netflix account," and I'd be like, "Yeah, why not?" Like literally not thinking anything was bad about it. And then the next day someone would post something about get a modded Snapchat app, and I'd be like, "Yeah, I'll give that a go." And I just love tinkering with things really. So you can see how easy that is. So
it started like that, and then at some point, I understand you got a hold of a stressor, or maybe somebody gave you one within, or the rights to use a stressor that could launch powerful denial of service attacks to take down websites, even of big companies.
I hit SecureWorld and all these other companies for the same reason of animal abuse.
And when you say you hit them, you were launching DDoS attacks against them with the stressor that you'd gotten in the hacker forum. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
And you were successful, right? I mean, you took down, for example, just using SeaWorld in San Diego as an example, you actually took down their website at least once or maybe more than that?
Yeah, it was a few times, but I think the one time that was like the most notable time, and I spoke about that before, I think it was the time that I basically I went from a stressor to a dedicated server. So I had like a command line stressor, if it makes sense, with all these attack scripts and my own like power, if it makes sense. But when you launch the attack, it doesn't have like a GUI where you can see what's going on and what's running. So I've either logged out or turned it off and just gone to bed. And I think it was 1 or 2 weeks later when I thought like the SeaWorld website's been down for a couple of weeks now. So I went to check, and the attack was still running. So yeah, I quickly paused that, and that's probably my first time I was like, oh, this might be bad.
Here you are. So you've got this, kind of social justice idea, and now you have the power to take down websites, and you're fully at this point, essentially into cybercrime and launching these DDoS attacks, and you've gained 27,000 followers, on social media. And as you think back to that, what was your mindset at the time? I mean, was your mind just blown that you could do all of this, or were you feeling nervous, or, really just stoked, really excited about it? What can you tell us?
So yeah, it started off as like a sort of social justice thing, because I'm majorly against animal abuse. So it started there, and then it ended up just being a power hungry thing. And I admitted that, and I admitted that to all kinds of people throughout the process. That I got carried away. But yeah, no, it easily happens because you see you can do it, and then you get these kudos, and you get this following and appreciation for what you're doing, and like. At 14, the lines blur between what's legal and what's not, and people are cheering you on, so it must be fine. If that kind of makes sense.
You're in school and you're kind of annoyed, I understand, about some things the local police department was doing, and now you decide you're going to launch an attack on their websites. Tell me just briefly about that and that fateful decision.
So I think like the majority of this all boils down to when I was a kid, I had like no money. My family didn't have any money or anything like that. So I kind of was bored all the time. And it stemmed from me not going out to doing the hacking. And then when I did go out, the police would be like, with me and my friends, that you can't stay here because you're annoying the neighbors, and you can't be here because you're intimidating people going into the shop across the road, and you're too old to stay in this like park area, so you need to move on to it. And it sort of felt like, well, I can't be at home because I'll end up like doing this, or I'll get like, hacked on COD. And I can't go out with my friends because the police are going to move me on. So I just DDoSed the police website. I mean, as you do, because I felt like I was being sort of targeted by the police. Obviously that wasn't the case, and I didn't understand that, But
when you're 14, it feels like maybe you are, right? Yes.
Yeah.
I can see that. Okay, so that's what you did. So you launched that DDoS, that distributed denial of service attack against the police. And then I don't know how much time passed, but when was it that you got arrested, about how much time passed between the DDoS attack against the police and your arrest, and then paint the picture for us of the arrest. How did it go down and what happened?
I did ask the police, and I think it was like 3 days later they arrested me. So they must have got to move on like majorly quick after that happened. When it happened, it was a major shock. Like, I couldn't believe it was happening. It was sort of like a dream. So I was walking down the street to go into school, and like I genuinely like had no worries. I had my headphones in. I was just chilling, and I heard some guy behind me saying my name. I think like the third time was when I turned around, and he's in a suit and he's just walking towards me really calmly. And that kind of freaked me out in itself. So I was like, yeah. And then he didn't say anything immediately. So I just carried on walking, thinking that I just heard something. He said it again. So I'm like, right, he must have been speaking to me now. So I turn around and he's like, you're under arrest. Stay where you are. And then there's like two more guys in suits behind him. So it's like a full-on FBI situation. And then like he looked over my shoulder and I kind of got this chill, and I turned around and there's like 10 or 8 police officers across the grass with like their tasers in hand. It was crazy. But yeah, it was very surreal. I was in the car handing over my phone, handing over like my keys, like putting it into evidence bags and everything. Like I went back to my house and they're like tearing up my room and everything. I think one of the worst parts of it, like I'll never forget this part. We went to my house initially and we got to the gate and my mum's hanging up the laundry on this line from the house to the gate. And I had to knock. She locks the gate because there's the dog in the backyard all day and the laundry hanging. So I'm like, Mum, can you open the gate? I've been arrested. And she like laughed and she said, what have you forgot? And I was like, no, I've actually been arrested. And she, like I could hear her walking towards the gate and she opened the gate and she was so surprised to see these like big cop dudes at the gate. And they're like, they opened this huge like scroll and they're like, we've got a warrant, we're coming in. And like just sort of shoved past and walked up into the house. And then after that, it was like it switched from like this crazy time to the detective like, you know, do you play Call of Duty? Do you do this? And at the time, I didn't realize what was going on, but obviously he was asking me those questions to see if I was the same guy doing the Call of Duty mods, therefore backing up their evidence, you know, for the DDoS attacks and all the rest of it. So it was definitely very well planned, and the guys who arrested me were definitely very well equipped.
Was your mind just racing through all of the different attacks that you had launched, or like you say, it was just like time was frozen, or what would you say about what it was like, you know, emotionally for you at that time?
I felt like a terrorist, 100%, because it's not like I'm being booked for a petty crime where they're just like, go sit over there or whatever, and you know they book you like normal. It was a procedure. Like the whole thing was very like procedurally followed. And I'll tell you what I mean. So they took me in, they put me in this one cell which was freezing and it stank, and they left me there for like a couple hours. And they said, right, you need to come with us. And there's like 4 of them taking me down the corridor, put me into this end cell which looked like I don't know, like on those horror films that contain the beast. So I had to sit in there, and I think that was like the most crazy thing, because then they're offering me cookies and stuff. They're like, do you want some cookies? And I'm like, nah, like the last thing I need is cookies. So I tried eating before I went in. I remember being too scared to even eat. Like I don't really scare that easy, but that was like, it was so scary. I felt so sick. I wasn't thinking about what I'd done. It was more of like, I feel awful for my mum, like my parents and my grandparents and all that sort of thing, because that's generally what you will think about when you get into that sort of situation. Because my mum's literally sat in the police station with me like the entire day as well. So I'm pretty sure the whole day it was like a blur. I don't know what I did. I'm pretty sure like I didn't sleep. I wasn't thinking about it, 'cause I tried deliberately not to think about it. So I just started doing push-ups and sit-ups. And I'm not even a strong dude. Especially at 14, I'm like this proper weasel kid. And I'm just doing push-ups on top of push-ups just to get the day past, because I was so wired. Yeah.
That does not sound fun.
It was crazy time, and it was really scary.
Yes, indeed. I'm getting stressed out just listening to you retell it, Cam. So, okay. So, all right. So here you are. Let's zoom out now, because, you know, we're doing this podcast as part of Youth and Cybercrime Week in conjunction with the Cybercrime Support Network, or CSN. And I'm wondering, as you look back, what are your observations of where and when you went wrong, where you got off track?
I think, well, I got off track the second I broke the law, to be honest, like with the DDoS attacks and being people offline. But I think it's going between the gaming and the SecureWorld stuff. There's other ways you can go about it, and there's probably more effective ways I could have done it even then. Just don't try and be the hero or the vigilante by breaking the law, because it doesn't matter what you do, you're still breaking the law. At the end of the day, at that time, there wasn't much available to show me where I was going wrong or what this was or what the law was on cyber. Since then, it's come along a long way.
How do you think teens and young adults, I mean, do you think this is still going on where they're going from gamers, where there's kids out there just like you, and then they find themselves just kind of sliding down towards cybercrime? Do you think that's still going on right now?
Definitely. Because it's easy. Like it is easy, and it will stay being easy, really.
What would you say to kids like right now? Let's say somebody's listening who says, they're kind of on the edge, right? Maybe they're in those hacker forums or chat rooms and they're thinking, maybe I take what I'm learning just up to the next level just to try it. What would you say to somebody like that?
I mean, definitely don't do it. Because I might have been fine back then. I'm pretty sure I was hanging on a thread because of the fact that there wasn't much government guidance. These days there is, so you won't have that defense. And not only that, but if you're in the United States, then you've got no chance, because they tried to extradite me, and I'm very glad they didn't, because they are a lot more harsh than the police in the UK. Not only that, obviously the cyber response teams in both countries and the rest of Europe have all come along a long way since all these sort of attacks, and the larger ones on the ISPs and other providers, they've come a very long way. So they work together now. They've got a lot more capability, and they'll catch you. Also, there's room for your skills in the industry. Even it doesn't matter how old you are. If you're over the age of 12 and you can do this hacking stuff, you can get paid a lot of money for using your skills on places like HackerOne anyway.
That's awesome. So you're talking about, if you're curious about this, instead of going into cybercrime, why not try and be a white hat hacker or security researcher, whatever you want to call it, find bugs, report them, help protect orgs, and make money all at the same time and advance your skills, right?
Yeah, definitely. So there's definitely money to be made. You don't have to be a black hat. It's definitely not that much easier to be a black hat anyway. So the risk versus reward isn't that great of a difference anymore anyway.
I also want to flip things here because, ironically, you now work in cybersecurity, right?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Tell us about your role.
So at the moment, I'm a security analyst at Hazer, which is the designated data body for England. I'm called an analyst, but more of like an engineer, if it makes sense. I don't usually do the analysis. But I work on SIM products quite a lot. And I build quite a lot of detection rules. So I see the attacks coming in and write rules to alert us as to those coming in. I'll write rules to automatically respond to those threats. So to put mitigations in place. Malware analysis, you name it. I do pretty much anything blue teaming. So whereas when I started, I was hacking, that's red teaming. I've completely turned the tables and ended up on the blue side. It might seem weird, but obviously now that I'm on this side, I can sort of remember how I would go about these things and like my mindset. And I know that companies I've worked at before and the company I work at now, they think that's a good thing.
As you look ahead to a career in cybersecurity, do you feel like there's just a lot of possibility out there for you, or what's your mindset right now? It's great. It's awesome. Like, honestly, after like a couple of roles in the industry, it opens your doors so much more. And I think compared to any other job, it's very, I don't know how to call it. Like, it's the market is employee run. That makes sense. So if you're an analyst, it's not like you're at risk of losing your job. Really, I wouldn't say, because you get recruiters messaging you every day just for being a standard analyst. Because there's a lot of demand out there for it, whether you be in America or the UK. I know for a fact in America, like the analyst salaries are like crazy for what you do. I think a lot of it comes from the buzzword, like just saying cyber. People are like, "Ooh, cyber." It does have a good ring. Do you think there's anything that those of us like on the outside. So what I mean is those of us who know teenagers, maybe who have teenagers, are there any warning signs we can watch for? But on the other side, are there things we can do to encourage, tech-loving teens to take their skills into security? What do you think about those two questions?
Yeah, sure. So for warning signs, one of a few things that I used to do was, obviously I used to just literally shut myself in my room, my laptop all the time. Obviously you get this standard parent thing where it's like, go outside, get some exercise. But obviously I just didn't want to know, and I just stay in my room. But obviously it's not really that normal to have a kids lock themselves in their room with a laptop. It's usually like you go up on your iPad or your phone or whatever, but I just love my laptop all the time. So I guess definitely if they're having too much time with a laptop in their room, like when no one can see them. Another couple of things is like having your laptop plugged in to your Xbox or the PS3 or PS4 or whatever, because there's no reason for that. There's no actual functional reason that you do that, unless you have some really weird internet setup at your house. Maybe USB sticks as well in the Xbox or the Xbox or PS4 or whatever, because that's usually how you load mods onto the Xbox or the PlayStation. Sort of icons on the desktop, backgrounds, logos associated with hacking, any aliases that are associated with hacking.
How do you think we encourage kids now to take their tech skills, their passion for gaming, for technology, for competition, whatever it is, and slide that over into cybersecurity? Because as you said yourself, I mean, there's just such demand for these kinds of people. We need it, right, to protect our organizations and really our nations, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like you look over at like countries like Russia, who are obviously sort of like, I don't know, sometimes a threat and sometimes not a threat. They're a bit of a imposing threat, I guess. They have their cybersecurity on point, and we're constantly trying to upgrade our own, along with you guys. But obviously we need these kids. It doesn't matter how old they are. If they're born that way, they either have it or you don't. If you're a tinkerer and you love fiddling with stuff and you love to find out how things work, generally that's sort of a sign of you be really good in this industry. A lot of people I meet who are like that. With regards to the question, I guess you can, like I said before, you can jump onto HackerOne, have a go at bug bounties. You're not going to jump on there and earn 10 grand in your first shot. You're probably better off just trying to get some low hanging fruit, do some training videos, use YouTube like you would anyway. You could bag a few $100s here and there. Like that's great spending money when you're a kid. But like even I get jealous of some people on there. Like the other day I looked at a guy who'd done like 4 different hits of like $12,000 in one day.
Oh man,
crazy! Could you imagine being like, "Oh, I'm running out of money. Like I was quickly bang out 48 grand in one day." Like okay.
That should take care of your money problems for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. Like you can definitely earn money once you get good. Obviously, those people are just out of this world crazy good at it. But you can too. Nothing's stopping you.
Isn't that a fascinating story of how easily you can get into cybercrime? And amazingly, Cam has turned that around. By the way, the transition, the pivot point into cybersecurity happened when his parole officer invited him to a security conference where he did really well at a capture the flag competition, and that led to his first job offer in security. Well, up next, how are kids and teens becoming victims of cybercrime, and what can we do about it? That's coming up as we continue to discuss Youth and Cybercrime Week.
Trend Micro is our premier podcast partner. So we want to give a shout out to 3 things the company is doing to fight cybercrime and boost the cyber workforce. Number 1, Trend Micro recently partnered with Interpol in a business email compromise awareness campaign in 59 countries, including the US and the EU. Secondly, Trend Micro runs the Zero Day Initiative, which is the world's largest vendor-agnostic bug bounty program. And number 3, Trend Micro is helping to build the cyber workforce of the future through its Close the Gap initiative, which provides scholarships, financial assistance, and fundraisers to advance women and diversity in cybersecurity. Please learn more about these initiatives in today's show notes.
Well, our next guest on the podcast today, as we continue our special coverage of Youth and Cybercrime Week, is Kristin Judge, who is CEO and founder of the Cybercrime Support Network, which is a nonprofit that's designed to help individuals and small and medium-sized businesses so they get the resources they need around cybercrime. And I know that they have a strong interest in our future and our kids as it relates to cybercrime as well. So Kristin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, fantastic to have you here. And I've been catching your live broadcasts on LinkedIn. So I've been seeing you all over the place. So it's great to have you here today.
And I love to get my SecureWorld updates too in my inbox. I think you guys do a great job of keeping us up on the most current information we need to know. So thank you for that.
Oh, good. Well, really appreciate that. And I know this week, this Youth and Cybercrime Week it's a really big initiative of your organization. Would you tell us a little bit about, what it's about and what it is that you would like to accomplish?
Yeah, Youth and Cybercrime Week is going to be September 14th to 18th this year. We did one last year also. And we want to make sure that we're putting out specific messaging to children, teens, college-age students, and their parents, because there are certain types of cybercrime and also certain places where these people live at these different ages where they can be impacted. So we do need to make sure that we give some separate messaging. So we'll talk about things like, Fortnite scams, scams around, even their social security numbers, and making sure that people are paying attention to that. Student financial scams, people trying to look for money for college, social media scams on a lot of the hot young people websites and social media places. So there's certain types of scams, especially online gaming, where we know that a lot of young people live, even older people, but a lot of young people, and we want to make sure they know what's going on.
That's great. Well, that's a fantastic goal. And I'd like to come back to some of those things a little bit later in the podcast. But right now, since we just heard Cam's story, the gamer who started modifying his games, then he joins hacker forums, and next thing you know, he's caught in cybercrime and he's launching DDoS cyber attacks. As you listen to his story, what are some of your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it breaks my heart a little bit because it's just so easy for someone who's younger to be brought into a world of crime and, this negative area if there's a lot of money and success attached to it. The serotonin levels and the dopamine rush for a 14-year-old who could potentially get paid $100,000 if they join the hacker ring, that's a real thing, so we have to be conscious of that. And I know DEF CON a few years ago, unfortunately, started sort of a hackathon at their conferences for people under 16. So that sort of rubbed me the wrong way. We need to be putting people that are young and good at computers into programs like the Cyber Patriot program. Start getting them into the white hack programs. There's so many great things for young people. So if you see someone who is a gamer and has these, skills like Cam, try and get them connected to something that's positive early on. And I'm so thankful Cam is willing to share his story and hopefully encourage others to take his second path, not his first path.
Yes, absolutely. And, as you were talking about that dopamine rush, he was describing things like that. And I think for him, the fact that all of a sudden, because he was kind of bragging about his exploits, his social media accounts blew up. He had 27,000 followers as a teenager. And that's kind of what we're up against here.
Well, teenagers live for light, don't they?
Absolutely.
It's a part of this, Generation Z, and that's really who we're trying to talk to in our Youth and Cybercrime Week. Is we know that they are digital natives. This is where they live. And we can't try and say, oh, don't do this, don't do that. We have to go where they are and then say, okay, let's just give them the information to make good choices.
Very good. Well, I know that, as I think of Cam's story, and I was thinking about a story that we had on our website at SecureWorldExpo.com, the first week of September, Miami-Dade schools, they had more than a dozen DDoS attacks knocking online school offline in the very first week of school. And they announced that most of those attacks were started by one of the high school juniors at a school in the district. And so as I hear about that and you hear Cam's story, what do you think it is we're missing? What do we need to be doing to grab a generation of kids who could go off track, but they have the skills we need actually, when they're guided in the right direction?
So I've worked a lot in K-12. I used to be an educator, and I've worked with K-12 as it relates to workforce development. And one of the things I think we're missing is educating teachers that are in the classrooms. When I worked with a team here, I was a cyber patriot coach in the town that I live in. And when I went to the school, the high school, I said, hey, can I come in and talk about cybersecurity job? And the computer teacher said, oh, well, we already had someone come in about programming. Like, no. Programming is not cybersecurity. There's this whole area that we can tell parents about. We should be going to the PTA meetings and saying, if your kids are good at this, look at cybersecurity as a career path. And NICE, the National Initiative on Cybersecurity Education over at NIST, has created this whole cyber pathways website where you can get all kinds of information. But if the teachers don't even really know what cybersecurity jobs are, they're not going to be able to get those kids who they see on the computers really excelling into the right place. So we've got to educate our middle school teachers, our high school teachers, and then educate our parent, because the kids are really good, but if the parents don't know about this, this field, they're not going to be able to steer their kids in the right direction. Parents know about doctors and lawyers and those kind of things, but they don't necessarily know about this incredible career path.
That is fascinating when you think about that. There are, you would say, oh, you're good in math. Boy, you should be a scientist or an astronaut or something like this. But what about those kids who are just technically gifted? And boy, this is right up their alley. So that's a really good point, Kristin. And I know that teachers right now, I've personally known a number of teachers who have struggled just with the switch to, school from home, right? And the technology around that. So this is something where we definitely need to do some more work to even get them thinking beyond that into the security space. That's a really good point.
Of course. And, for our teachers, our educators, similar to when I used to spend my time years ago educating elected officials about cybersecurity. They don't want to look like they don't know what they're doing. Excuse me. And they think I have to be a technology person to understand this. But we just have to give them the easy tools. Maybe, create some checklists of how you can encourage gifted students in computers to, get to the right place. And there are great mentors out there. We just need to help educate the K-12, I believe.
That's a great place to start. Okay, I like that. All right, so that was fantastic. I want to shift gears a little bit now to talking about kids as victims of cybercrime. And you touched on this briefly at the start, but what do we know about the way our kids or our youth or teenagers, whatever you want to call them, are becoming victims right now?
Well, I have to tell you, the reason I got into cybersecurity originally as an elected official is because we had 3 kids in my community. I live in the suburbs, not a lot of crime here, but we had 3 kids in our community impacted by cyber criminals. And this was back in 2009. One person met someone on Xbox and she left her family at 16 and went to Puerto Rico with this gentleman. Another student met someone on Facebook and went to Minnesota. And a third person met a predator online and was going to go out of town with them, but they caught the guy in the high school parking lot.
Wow.
So, this was in 2009. So I realized right away, okay, bad guys now can get into our living rooms and we may not even know they're there. So it's really important that we understand as parents and adults in the community that there are touch points to our kids now. So it's all about communication, in my opinion. We need to make sure that the kids understand they can come and tell parents when they see something that's fishy. We've done some research, not CSN, but I've seen out other organizations have done that about 75% of kids who are approached by a predator online don't tell their parents. They're afraid maybe they're going to get their gaming taken away or their computer taken away. So you've got to set up a policy at home. Tell me, I'm not going to take it away, but I just need to know so we can talk about it, or, find some good videos online that explain what could happen. So to me, it's all about open communication with your kids. And it comes from the parents, the caregivers, and you have to have that open line of communication. Otherwise, they will, friend someone on a gaming site or social media site that looks to do harm.
That is such it's like a modern version of what I remember growing up, where my parents said, when I was in high school, they said, if you're ever somewhere where you don't feel safe and you need out of there, even if it's the middle of the night, call us. We'll come get you and we'll ask questions later, but we just want you to be safe. And it's almost like you're describing, we need to set up something like that in the online realm now for our kids, right?
It's exactly the same thing. We had that policy with our kids. If you end up, drinking underage, or you're with people that are drinking and you don't feel safe, we'll pick you up anytime, anywhere. And, I think that's what you have to say is there aren't going to be consequences if you're, just feeling uncomfortable or scared. I'm here to help and I'm not going to judge you. But here's what is out there. You don't want people to feel that the internet is a bad place. But you also, when we give someone a driver's license, we tell them they have to wear their seatbelt. There's airbags in the car. We give them training. And I liken what we did with, smartphones to the driver safety. We just handed kids a phone. We never took them on driver's ed. My kids had all this behind the wheel time, behind the, watching the screen. They were in the class. They had their permit at first, so they could only drive with someone else. We just hand kids a phone. And that's the world there. And there's a million criminals on that other end of that phone, but we never take the time to do the driver's ed. So I think just as your kids are younger and growing up, start that driver's ed process before they even get a phone. Show them what you do on yours that's a part of security. Show them things that maybe a false text that comes in. Say, oh, look at this text message. I can tell this is not from someone I know, so I'm going to delete it. So you just got to make it part of what you do, just like you talk about safe driving, healthy eating. It's just part of our life now.
That is an amazing analogy too. That idea that you take driver's ed before you put them behind the wheel, but yet we're giving them the world on their devices. And I never thought of it in that way. So that was great, Kristin. That really paints the picture. Now, I also want to ask you about something else you'd mentioned, which were some of these scams that are out there. And I know personally, having especially a middle schooler who loves Fortnite, that it's been discussed before, could I see somebody is selling these V-Bucks, they're called, but it's the currency within the game, for less than you can buy them from the game themselves. And I'm like, we're not doing that. But I mean, that's one of the ways kids are being scammed, right? What's happening out there in that space?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And, when my son was younger, one of the things that the criminals did is they would say, hey, I can give you some of these ramp ups in Call of Duty. And if you just give me your phone number, then next time you're playing, I'll come on with you. And he was grooming him as a pedophile, I believe. And I said, first of all, you're not supposed to talk to friends that aren't people but if someone's offering you to ramp up on Fortnite or on Call of Duty, it's really enticing. And my son said to me, but Mom, he sounds like a really nice guy and he sounds pretty young. So I don't think it's an old guy. Like he pictured the scammer being like an old guy that, would be coming after him. And he said, no, he sounds young. So I think he's okay. And he's very nice to me, he said. So I had to explain about grooming. And so, having parental controls, especially based on the age of your kids, there are parental controls for games. You need to be paying attention and sit down and play with them. When my son got an Xbox, my husband got one too. And they would play together in the games. So it was awesome. Just natural to have, he got a PSP, my husband got a PSP, and that's what they did. And so it was just part of, let's do this together instead of in my corner, in my room. Another thing we say is don't put it in their bedroom. They shouldn't be able to play those games in their bedroom with a closed door. It should be out in the living room or the family room, dining room table, so that you can have that access and they don't feel like they can go somewhere and do it in private.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And I will tell you that at our household, everybody's phones and devices are on my nightstand before going to bed. And it leads to a lot of unhappy discussion on a regular basis, but I am committed to doing it. So thank you for saying I should. That's good.
You have to. I mean, as parents, it's hard, but just the online addiction to our phones. Mm-hmm. I know for me too, it's hard sometimes to put down my phone, but if we don't step in, just like we wouldn't let our kids sit down next to a bag of candy all night, right. when they're 8 years old, you don't leave out all the Halloween candy in one night. You give them a little bit at a time, right? And so it's the same thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. That is awesome. All right, well, let's talk about the Cybercrime Support Network overall mission, because I know you guys do a lot of great things, but how would you describe your mission?
Our mission very clearly is to serve consumers and small businesses impacted by cybercrime, period. We want to help them before, during, and after.
And okay, so that's a very succinct mission statement. I love it. It's very focused. And I heard you speak at a SecureWorld conference one time where you were throwing out some numbers, something about most individuals, certainly, but even a surprising number of small and medium businesses, they don't know where to turn if they're a victim of cybercrime. And that's a real problem. So can you kind of unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, and that's what we're aiming to solve. When we get into the logistics of what we do to serve these cybercrime victims, is we're setting up the infrastructure so they can get the help that they need. And so if you look at countries like Israel, they have 119 for cybercrime on a national level. UK has the UK Action Fraud Network. There's Report Cyber in Australia. So some of our friendly countries that we work with, they have one national system where people can either call or go online and get help that they need. They can report, they can learn how to recover, they maybe get help with their computer, they get services after a victimization. And we don't have that yet in the US, but we're working as a nonprofit with CISA at DHS. And we've been funded through them and partially funded through the Department of Justice, Office of Victims of Crime. And we're building a national infrastructure and we're piloting it. And then hopefully over time in the next couple of years, we can be funded for a national center that's similar to what they have in those other countries. And Americans will have one number to call, one place to go. They'll be triaged at that call center and then sent to where they need to go based on what happened to them. So that's where we're going to be hopefully in 2 years.
Wow, that's fantastic. I mean, that's really exciting. And in the meantime, if organizations don't know or individuals don't know where to report cybercrime, what do you think that means about the overall numbers of cybercrime victims as we see them now? What does that mean?
Yeah, so we, in our research and research done by Gallup, we find that 1 in 4 Americans is a victim of cybercrime every year. So there's about 50 million people a year that are impacted by cybercrime, and about 2 million report it. So we've got about 48 million people not reporting.
Wow.
Partially because they don't know where to go, partially because they say, well, I don't think anyone will help me anyway. And the third reason is they're embarrassed, especially romance scam victims, tech support scam victims. They think that they were duped and it makes them look bad. We want to encourage people to start talking about it more. And then what we did, because we knew we don't have our national center yet, we put up Fraudsupport.org. And people can go there now, no matter where they live in the country, and triage themselves. Small businesses and consumers can click on the type of crime they were impacted by, and they can get steps to report, recover, and reinforce their security.
Wow, that's fantastic. That is great. Well, you guys are already making so much progress. And then as I think about Youth and Cybercrime Week, and how do you want to go about expanding this and having a bigger impact from that particular week as we look toward the future?
So what we built on Fraud Support was a portal that's related to issues facing kids, teenagers, college students, and their parents. And we want to keep growing that portal with more resources. So we're always looking to grow more resources and send more people to Fraud Support so that they can have the best resources. Partially with our funding from CISA, we are going to be adding to fraudsupport.org a resource database that's searchable. Right now, it'll have about 1,200 items on there based on what happened to you. You can get resources. And that will launch the end of September, middle of October. And then we're just going to keep adding to that. So we want to have one place for people to go to find out resources, find out how to report, and then how to recover. So there'll be even more content coming to Fraud Support, and much of that can be utilized with the youth and kids and parents.
Oh, that is fantastic. Well, Kristin Judge, CEO and founder of the Cybercrime Support Network, thanks for all that you guys are doing, and thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Bruce. It was really my pleasure.
And if you want to know more about the Cybercrime Support Network, there is a link in the show notes. They have so many resources. We also have linked to the Cyber Patriot program, which Kristin mentioned, and also Trend Micro's Zero-Day Initiative if you're looking to make money from bug bounties and test out your security research skills. Thanks for being with us during this Youth and Cybercrime Week podcast. And on behalf of the entire SecureWorld team, I'm Bruce Sussman, your host of the SecureWorld Sessions, and let's catch